Hello, everyone. Welcome to Tea with TPS. Today, we have two distinguished guests. The first is Shalini Goyal Bhalla, an author, researcher, educationist, environmentalist, social worker, speaker, and whatnot. She's an activist on economic issues, particularly on sustainability. She chairs the International Council for Circular Economy, and she has written the first book on circular economy in India. This book was released by Mr. Amitabh Kant of Niti Aayog in Delhi. She also has other interests. First time I saw her was at an Indo-American seminar in New Delhi. So her interests range from environment to international relations. So congratulations, Shalini, on your book. What we propose to do is to have a conversation on your book with the assistance of no less a person than an eminent economist, Dr. C.S. Shaijumon. I need his help to ask questions, real questions on the economy and circular economy at that. So the conversation will be basically between the two of you, and I'll simply add whatever I know about this particular part of economics. My thoughts go back to the days when I used to be the chief negotiator for environment at the United Nations for India. I used to be the vice chairman of the Conference of Parties to the Climate Change Convention. The main issue at that time, soon after the 1992 Rio Conference, was the word sustainability. In fact, I don't know whether you know it, the word sustainability was disputed by developing countries, including India initially. Because our view was that the moment you add an adjective to development, it becomes a conditionality. So we spent many hours arguing with the Western world, saying that the word sustainable cannot be accepted. But we considered various other ways to express that. We had no objection to the concept. In fact, our argument has always been that we want sustainability. And we used to tell them that you don't have to tell us about sustainability. Because it is in India. India is the only country in the world where used newspapers are used for packing vegetables. Nowhere else in the world. Nowhere else in the world do people make chappals out of used motor car tires. They would be astonished. Oh, are you doing all this? So we used to tell them sustainability is not new to India. In fact, for all developing countries, it is a matter of survival. But when you say sustainable economic development, you are imposing restrictions on us. That is, you must be careful about environment protection. And so this went on for months together. It was finally India accepted it with a certain definition. And now that has become the mantra of developed and developing countries all. So I told you this story because even though sustainability and that adjective to development has been accepted, there is that lurking suspicion that when the Westerners talk about sustainability, they are actually questioning our style of living. And when we speak about greenhouse gas emissions and protection of the environment, we are asking them to change their lifestyles, which they refuse to do. So, in that context, what you have written about circular economy has a very special meaning for India. Because this is something that we have been doing in the past. It is nothing new to us. It is not simply recycling, but the idea is to live close to nature, use the advantages available in nature, and our consumption is limited to such an extent that you are able to multiply the resources available to us. And that is why your book, though the concept is new, this is something very dear to India. And I'm glad that this thought has come from our side. Dr. Shaijimon is an eminent economist, and he is the Associate Professor of Economics in the Indian Institute of Space Science and Technology. And it's very difficult to get him these days because he's very busy analyzing the budget. Of course, we won't discuss the budget, but obviously there will be some implications on sustainability and circular economy, waste management, etc. in our discussions. Welcome, both of you.
Thank you, sir.
Well, let me ask the first question, a layman's question. Somewhere in your book, you say that what triggered off your thoughts about circular economy was the report that the Taj Mahal was turning yellow. It's quite natural for an Indian to feel concerned about that. And so you started studying the impact of acid rain on marble. Tell us about that. How did this trigger in your mind and take you on to the consideration of circular economy as a way of protecting the environment? How did you react to this report?
So, sir, this is actually about my post-graduation period. And while I was doing my post-graduation in ecology and environment, I was studying about how the acid rain was impacting Taj. And living here in North India and listening to the friends who came from abroad about their anxiety on visiting Taj, was the two different feelings we had as an Indian. So one is excitement of having the seven wonders in India, and the other is seeing the deterioration of its marble. That was a point when I wanted to write my thesis on acidification of Taj, and I started studying about it. And that made me understand how a small city like Agra could have these impact on environment, and if that is the case with Agra, what's happening with the rest of India? And that's when I started reading more and more about the environmental impact of the gases, the greenhouse gas emissions, and that brought me closer and closer to sustainability. And while I was in formal career, I was always working on the environmental topics, and I was working on sustainability. Like you said, it's not new for India, but we are there, and this is ingrained in our DNA. And I was trying to study what was the impact of these things on our normal living. So it was quite inspiring for me. And when I started reading about circular economy and how the Westerns were coming up with this concept, I started to see that this is actually something that India has been practicing, and India has a lot to offer the other world. So this book was an obvious extension of my study, an obvious understanding and writing, because I saw there was a gap in information which need to be bridged. So that's how I got into it, sir.
But has there been any development which will prevent this deterioration of the marble in practical terms?
Sir, at the ground level, there are a lot of efforts that are going on. Central Pollution Control Board and the State Pollution Control Boards have been doing a lot of work, be it the renewable energy in terms of installing a lot of solar power plants and replacing the old thermal power plants by them. But I think it still will take time to see the impact. So if you go to any historical monument, I visit a lot of forts because I like the Indian heritage, and I see how each be it the red stone or the marble stone, how are they being impacted by the pollution still? So I am not saying that there is not we are not doing much, but we need to improve our pace to kind of restrict the harm that we have already done. The damage has been done. It's now more of avoiding the further damage of the monuments.
No, but that means what you are suggesting is that this is all linked with the overall issue of environment. You cannot separate, you cannot isolate Taj Mahal or some other monument and work on it. We have, of course, the Paris Agreement you are aware of, the global warming you are aware of. And all that has not had any effect, really. 1.5 degrees Celsius, we are not able to reach anywhere near. So it's a matter of a kind of impasse in environmental protection. Of course, the United States has joined the Paris Agreement again, and things may improve. But it's a long-term thing.
Yes.
But there is really no hope of our being able to do something specially for the Taj Mahal. Is that right?
Sir, of course, it is a long-term thing, and it cannot be. You cannot segregate Taj from the environment, as you rightly said. It has to be the overall impact, and it will take time. It will definitely take time. You can still see a lot of deterioration happening, and it pains to say that we cannot segregate it, and it's an integral part of the entire ecology, being a monument there. We cannot segregate the environment and the physical aspect of it. So it's embedded, and we have to work towards the overall environmental change that we are working. And the good news is that more and more people are becoming conscious now of the environmental damage and the sustainable living. So there is a latest report which has come from Accenture, which says that 72% of the people are now making more wiser decisions when it comes to the sustainable products. So I think that's a very good news for us today, as we said. And if the consumer is aware, I think we'll be able to make a massive change when it comes to the environmental impact.
But you still have 73 million people who voted for President Trump. Don't forget that. Who think that climate change is a hoax.
Yeah.
Anyway, Shaiju, what do you want to ask her?
Yeah, let me first congratulate her for writing this wonderful book on circular economy.
I do have it.
Yeah, this is actually wonderful.
Thank you so much, sir.
And it's a very, very well crafted book, I would say, because I got the honor to read from its beginning stage till the end. So I know each and every sentences of this book. And
a secret that you helped her with it.
Yeah, actually, sir, when you see this book, I would say a couple of features of this book. One is, as you rightly said, this is first of its kind in India. Used worldwide examples to explain the concept of circular economy. Real life examples she had used to explain the distinction between linear economy and circular economy. And number two, she used case studies and pictures, tables, and charts, which actually makes the reader very, very, very easy to absorb the content, whatever she tried to explain. This is what we need right now. That is why I would say this book is good for not only for the general reader, but also for the academicians as well as the policy makers. Why I said so? Because I am not saying just for pricing or anything, because I won't do that. Because when I read this book, I have seen that she has quoted, she has used citations of different concepts that she used in this book, and figures and facts that she used, and bibliography references she had given. Also, it is actually timely book at the time when the Industrial Revolution 4.0 is on right now. And this is actually, the world is moving very fast, especially Indian economy is also moving very fast. As we are all aware that 18% of world population is thickly populated inside the land territory of just 2.4% of the world. So then definitely the optimization of resources or circular economy is very, very important for the policy making of the country. Not only for the policy making, but also for the students who are supposed to learn from their beginning that what is circular economy all about. So she clearly distinguished, the differentiate the distinction between linear economy and the circular economy. So I wanted to ask her that what you said that the motivation like Taj Mahal story that she went into this kind of sustainable development work. But I just wanted to ask you, what motivated you to write such a comprehensive book on right time? So is there any kind of some kind of people advised you, or you just thought about yourself that I'm going to write a book of such kind? I'm eager to know that.
Sure, sir. So, in your question, you have actually given me two very important hints for the motivation that I got while I was writing the book. So, first of all, it was a new topic. It is a topic which is talked a lot in Europe. And for the Indian, if you talk about the Indian perspective, we don't have much knowledge. So, I was trying to find out the application of circular economy in India. And I took almost 6 months to find that there was nothing much about the Indian in the Indian context. So that was my motivation, and I thought such an important topic, which is taking the entire Europe and the developing nations by stride. Why is it not being published much in India? Why is there not much research happening in that? I could find a lot of research happening in plastics, the packaging industry, perhaps because there have been some change in policies, but there was not much on circular economy as such. And I think that was my motivation. I thought we need to write about the Indian context. So if you look at the book and you read, you have been a part of it, so certain businesses that are operating in India, and I quote them in the circular terms. A very simple example is like the cab services of by Ola and Uber, and how these services are changing the business models, which are very much suitable to a circular economy. So the idea was to teach Indian people using international examples, international case studies, but also telling them about the existing models in India, how we are operating without knowing that it's actually circular economy. And then the application of these business models in India, how could we improve, was the next thing that I wanted. And that's why perhaps I wanted to talk about the business models, one specific chapter that talks about the circular business models and compare them with the international context. So I think that was the motivation, and I had your support. Thank you so much for that. And I think Sir TP Sir was my again inspiration, who writes so many books. So I thought, why not I try something to pen down? Well, I was not very sure that I'll do a good job at it. Very scared in the beginning, I must say. Thank God I didn't know that it is going to be the first book on circular economy, and it is only when I went for publishing that I realized that it was the first book. Otherwise, I believe I would have been more nervous about it.
Yeah,
that reminds me that we have a huge student audience. Probably you know already that the St. Teresa's College has adopted us, and our viewership has multiplied. And most of these viewers are students, not necessarily economic students, but also others. Do you think you have a wide audience in that? You will have a wider audience than just economic students, because there is a matter of practical value for everyone as citizens of India.
Oh, yes, sir. Definitely. So the audience of circular economy is beyond the economic students. It includes the environmentalists who are working towards it, policymakers like Shaju sir very aptly said. And when we talk about students, there are a lot of entrepreneurs. I do a lot of session with the entrepreneurs and aspiring startups who want to kind of make their business models circular. And so I do the incubation, I mentor them as well. So we have a huge audience beyond the economic students, certainly, sir. And I hope that this episode will be...
Your own institute, will there be readers? Will it fit into any of the things that you study, you teach there?
Actually, I found that, sir, that's what I was about to tell. Because when you read the chapter tourism, so this is a chapter I found it very, very interesting because in each and every small single aspect of tourism, she has connected to circular economy, right from transport to accommodation and the food that they use when we travel as tourists. So how that she's actually showing to the people that how the linear economy is actually making problems in our economy. So in that way, when a student read that in any discipline, from any discipline, I teach the students of engineering or I teach the students of like science and all, but still they will also understand this book because because of these examples. And she has never used any jargons, academic jargons in this book for explanation. In that way, when a common reader or a normal student, even an undergraduate student, when she or he reads, the message is very clear. This is also I wanted to ask her what kind of message that she intended to give to the world through the book. Is that the only that circular economy, or are you trying some kind of world models or examples or case studies which you are projecting and actually connecting to Indian situation, and thereby you wanted to give a message that so sustainability is more important than even in any other thing of human life. Is that I don't know whether I understood it correctly or not.
Yes, sir, you are definitely right when you say that. But to extend to it or add to it, I really did not know the anecdote, sir, TP sir, which you were mentioning about sustainability as an adjective to the development. But that comes as a welcome addition to my knowledge. When I was writing the book, sir, one of the key messages when I started writing was continuously hitting my mind, and that was about India and Indian culture. And what I was thinking is that India has a lot to offer when it comes to sustainability and circular economy as well. And for Indians particularly, the message that I want to give is that we need to unlearn more than learn the new concept. So we are right now, what is happening is we are looking at this subject as a very technical subject, and we want to know what is happening in Europe, how are they moving with it, how are they progressing. But it is not so. I think we should not do that. We are doing something wrong. We need to unlearn the practices that we have learned in last 2 decades, and I think we will be better equipped to implement circular economy than any other developed nation for that sake. So again, one of the things that India can offer everyone is about the reduction in the resource consumption. We were not, the resource consumption levels in India are comparatively lesser than the developing nations, as we know. But this has been constantly happening, though there is a huge middle class growing up and the consumption patterns are changing. But still, India has a lot to offer to the world when it comes to teaching circular economy practices. And that is what I kept in mind, and perhaps that is why I keep referring India as when I say that it's a re-emerging moment, and that's perhaps why I kept the name of the book. I titled the book as Re-emerging Moment because it is something that I think is already there in the Indian DNA, and we just need to re-explore it. So that's what I thought. Another thing that I thought was the key message was where we are lacking is the innovation and technology. And I think what we need to do is learn that from the Europe and implement that in India so that we place better models and better examples we can set for the world. So that was my understanding, and that is what I wanted to highlight in the book. I hope I'm able to do that.
Well, if I may go back to the debate that I referred to in the beginning, the two ways in which we confronted the West, as it were. First is India has already got a sustainable practice in our lifestyle. There's nothing new. We are used to it, and therefore they don't need to teach you anything. But at the same time, we need development. And Mrs. Gandhi's famous speech in Stockholm in 1962 It's now the mantra of developing countries. Poverty is the worst polluter. Because if Indians are engaged in any kind of pollution, that is because of the lack of facilities like fuel, for example. If a mother has to cook her evening meal with pieces of wood, she wouldn't mind going and cutting a tree. It's a survival for her. But if you are able to replace her fuel in an adequate manner, in an environment-friendly manner, she will not go and cut the trees. They don't seem to understand that. They say that you do what we ask you to do. Don't do what we do. We will keep our 3 cars and 4 air conditioners and live like that. We will not make any changes. But you change. You stop cutting the trees. You stop using the water. And that kind of an approach is what we had objected to all the time. Of course, all that debate is over now because everything is voluntary control of emissions. But this point has to be pressed that India has sustainable habits, but at the same time, the changes in the resources availability, etc., we also need, as you said, technology. And the technology is available, except that the environment-friendly technology happens to be more expensive. That is why we developed the concept of incremental cost. You can make 100 tons of cement with a particular cost if environment is ignored. And we do the same thing, then the 50% the cost will increase. So in Rio de Janeiro, they told us that we will pay you the incremental cost. That was the big decision that was taken. But that's all forgotten now. Nobody is talking about incremental cost. They are only talking about some kind of cash made available for, some technologies. So that is a fact. But let's move on to your idea of recycling and waste management. That is a major issue in India. And what are your solutions?
Sir, recycling, as we understand in circular economy, I'll answer this question in a little different fashion. For circular economy, recycling is the last possible option. So what circular economy has to say is that before we go for recycling, there are many other ways of keeping the product in loop, in use, maybe through reusing, through sharing, through collaborations, through refurbishing or remanufacturing. And the last one is recycling. Unfortunately, what is happening is the entire agenda of circular economy has been hijacked by the word recycling and waste management. Whereas these two plays the last role and the least important role when it comes to circular economy. So my continuous agenda when I talk about circular economy is that we should talk about enhancing the lifespan of the product, how the products will become more durable, how the products will work as not a single product but components, how we can replace one component if it goes bad to make the entire system work. If at last nothing works, then comes the recycling. And I perhaps when I speak to a lot of international counterparts, I see that this is something that we are challenging, and we don't have to only talk about recycling. It has to be the more durability, the system designing, the industrial symbiosis that should work, and how we make our products more sustainable, more durable is the question. Well, to answer your question, sir, there is recycling happening in India. If you look at waste management, Swachh Bharat Mission in 2014 was started with good objectives, and it from eliminating open defecation to segregating the waste. It is a good project, and I think India should continue with all force to work towards segregation. So unless segregation happens, waste management could not be commercialized in terms of recycling. So the first and foremost for any country, including India, is segregation. And that is where the individual plays a very important role. What I see is, unfortunately, even after having this Swachh Sarvekshan Abhiyan for 3 years now, the segregation isn't happening. And there are very few cities we can actually count on fingers, the cities which are working on segregation. I think Saiju sir will agree with me that there is very less recycling happening when it comes to plastics. We are talking about a lot of other alternates, maybe plastic roads, we are talking about plastic furniture, but this is not a sustainable solution. We need to talk about effective recycling, which is not only detrimental to the environment, but it is also cost effective. So we are not concentrating on that. Right now, we are talking about issues that are just using the plastic waste. And what about the other waste we are least bothered? I'm sorry to say the waste to energy plants in India have not been great success. So they are not, again, the reason being is the segregation not happening properly. The quality of the waste is not good, is not segregated. The calorific value isn't high. And that is why when in this budget we were talking about the bioremediation, it talks about importance of bioremediation of the landfill sites. I'm sorry to say, I would like to see what will be the kind of impact it will bring. Will it be able to make the kind of impact government is expecting, or will still end up in the same issue and will come up after 5 years or maybe 3 years saying that there is no segregation happening of the waste, so the plants or the way the methods that we are using aren't working. So maybe it's time to think. That's why I say it's policy making which plays a very, very important role, and we should think about that. We should think about what works for the Indian scenario the best.
Okay, Shaju.
Okay. When we discuss about Indian economy, as you are aware, this is a developing economy, always looking for achieving higher and higher rate of growth. So, little while ago, Ambassador was talking about, the word sustainability and economic growth. And when we talk about economic growth, we are actually trying, and we are taking technology and policies from abroad and trying to look only in the perspective of linear economy way. So you think about any policies or any technology which we use inside the country, government promoted or private, the primary aim is profit motive. So the human beings naturally wants to achieve maximum welfare, or they wanted to satisfy their greed. I would say it is greed. And then at the same time, you are proposing to introduce a circular economy for the economy like India. So what kind of trade-off will happen between these two aspects? Like on the one hand, so you wanted to achieve higher rate of growth to eradicate poverty from our country. On the other hand, you wanted to introduce circular economy for a sustainable development path. So, what kind of policies or what kind of measures that you can suggest to the country as well as the world, for a country which is having the second largest population?
So, sir, see, as I remember when you talk about the greed, I can recall the famous uh, sentence which was said by Mahatma Gandhi. He said that the world has enough for everyone's need, but not for everyone's greed. It's very difficult to say what will be the kind of trade-off between the profit margins and the of the industry. So industry definitely will run with the profit margins, and their key objective is profit. So I think it's very difficult to do away with that, and it will be very unwise of us also to do that, because they are the employment generators. They are the contributors to the major GDP of the country. But at the same time, I think what we need to do is educate the consumer, uh, bring policies that are stringent, and also bring a kind of sustainability within. So, if I were to talk again about the union budget that was announced on 1st of Feb, they were talking about the vehicle scrapping policy, and for the first time, we have introduced a voluntary scheme of vehicle scrapping. So again, looking at that, I think why voluntary and why not mandatory? So this is something that we need to think about. So the policies play an important role when we talk about this. Again, if we talk about policy, we see a lot. There are two sectors which comes to my mind time and again are the automobile sector, because a lot of automobile recycling needs to be done more than the kind of efforts that are happening at the moment. And the other one is the construction and demolition waste, which is again a very big sector and has huge potential. Also, because 50% of the infrastructure, when we look at the reports, one of the reports by Accenture states that 50% of the infrastructure that will be developed by 2050 is yet to be developed. So that shows the kind of real estate boom that is coming and that will be happening in India till 2050. So by that standard, why are we not talking about the C&D waste? Why are we not making any stringent policy on that? I think we need to be proactive. And when it comes to policies, I would rather suggest that we are more reactive, and we should not be reactive. We should be active on the policy making. So one of the objectives at ISCCE that I am focusing on is trying to come up with policies before it is too late. I mean, we are almost at the verge of it. But rather than reacting to the policies or maybe waiting for what West is making, why not come up with the policies which are very instrumental or helpful for the Indian economy? So these two sectors, I mean, there are other sectors as well, but I see these two sectors as one of the most important sectors that would help Indian economy grow. Again, coming back to it, sir, there are 81% of the buyers which say, according to the Accenture report, that they will be making sustainable decisions in buying when in the next 5 years. So coming to it, green procurement is something that the government should focus on. I think they are talking about it, and a lot of discussion is happening on it. Again, the policies, and if we come up with stringent plans and their execution is done properly, I think that will be a good move for India.
Okay, Shalini, in your chapter 5, which you call the most favorite chapter for you, there are two things that I'd like to explore. One, you say that circular is an alternative to gyms in terms of people's health. And the second is yoga. It's a substitute for some kind of sustainable, human living. Can you explain that, these two concepts?
Yes, sir. So it's very, very interesting, sir. I was actually, I'll correlate it to one of the live examples which I was working on last year. So I was working on a project which is called Project Zero, and this was happening with hotels and schools in Delhi. Hotels in Uttarakhand and schools in Delhi. And I was working on 12 major indicators, wherein one of the indicators was energy. And as we all know, energy is a very important sector when it comes to circular economy and the most polluting as well. So when I was doing this, we were trying to find out how we could make the energy, how we can conserve energy in a school. And so this one of the schools that we were working with had a gym. And the equipment in the gym were kept on standby mode most of the time when they were not in use. And we tried to calculate the carbon footprint of these equipment. And what we came to see was if that 2 hours of treadmill in the gym was actually responsible for 446 kgs of carbon dioxide emission. So what was the alternate? And when we were developing this program, we started to think, what is the alternate? The alternate was to take out the kids, take them for some kind of physical exercise or some kind of physical work. So what we did with them was we took them out for plogging. We said, let's do two things together. Plogging is a very good exercise and as well, and picking up plastic at the same time. So we said, okay, let's do that. We saw that it was a very engaging, output-oriented, environmental friendly activity which led physical exercise as well without any energy wastage or greenhouse gas emissions. So this is something that made me write this chapter, particularly saying, why are we concentrating on the gyms? So there is a new, you could see in Delhi, we see, I'm sure it's happening everywhere else. Gyms are gaining a lot of focus, and the health sector, we see a lot of proteins coming up, a lot of exercise treadmill. We see the advertisements and pamphlets everywhere. So we are once again, we are going into the we are imbibing the Western culture. But why so? Why don't we practice normal thing that have been taught by our ancestors? Yoga is one. Ayurveda is the other one. Ayurveda, sir, you're from Kerala, and you know how how important Ayurveda is, has a lot of Shuddha and Chakrata have given us almost every alternate to the allopathic medicine that we practice today. I'm not against that, but what I'm trying to say is, as long as we have sustainable solutions, we should try to do that. And instead of reusing the Western culture, why don't we take our culture abroad and tell them that this is a circular alternating? Why are we practicing this? Why don't we do what is suggested by our ancestors, and we take out these books? At some point of time, I even want to write a whole book on yoga as an alternate, a circular alternate to Jews, which is a very good case study in itself. So.
Well, the Prime Minister will be very happy if you write a book on yoga. He's the one who has propagated it, as you know. But I understand it right that these exercises and Western medicine, etc., the harmful effect is simply emission of more greenhouse gases. Is that what you are saying?
No, sir, I'm saying this is one of the side effects. I mean, definitely greenhouse gas emissions and the energy that is consumed to make it or maybe run the equipment is definitely one. But there are other side effects as well, which I would say I'm not good enough to quote. As an environmentalist, I can talk about the greenhouse gas emissions and I can talk about the alternate. But I think there are other harmful effects as well.
Well, I was listening to a talk by this famous, the greatest thinker of the 21st century, Yuval Harari. I'm sure you are familiar with his history of mankind and the future. He's a historian who writes the history of the future. And one thing that he said was fascinating in this context. He said, all of us sitting here, he's addressing an audience, saying that are likely to be killed by McDonald's and Coca-Cola than by the guns of the Islamic group. An Islamic terrorist group is unlikely to kill any of you, while McDonald's and Coca-Cola will surely do that. Isn't it a very telling expression? So those are the kind of things that you are talking about, right?
Yes, definitely, sir, definitely. And I'm very sorry to say that this is no more a kind of a Western thing that we used to talk about McDonald's or obesity being one of the lifestyle changes that happened in the West. But India is also picking up very fast on this. And we see obesity also becoming one of the challenge in the Indian childhood. So I think
in the US, that is the biggest killer. Biggest killer in the US is obesity, nothing else.
This is the one thing that I was mentioning earlier. In the name of development or policies, we just adopt certain kind of observances which are happening in the Western world. We tend to think that those are all going to lead us also to become a developed country. So that is what you are actually exposing to the world through this book. So I wanted to ask you that, you have mentioned 5 different sectors in the book, focused 5 sectors, for introducing, circular economy. So in your opinion, which sector would lead more economic gain or more beneficial when you introduce circular economy in India?
so, sir, like I said, I think I did mention in one of my answers to you. I think automobile sector and construction and demolition waste is definitely something which I have skipped in this because I was not well equipped to write about them. But certainly my books following will cover them because these are the 2 most important sectors. Real estate definitely being one of them, and I'm not keeping the construction and demolition waste out of the real estate sector. So that's definitely one of the sectors that I see. And the other one is the automobile sector. But having said that, I also am very keen to work on another sector like you mentioned about Taj sir earlier. And because I'm a traveler and I see and I believe I have good observation, is the tourism sector that can bring a great gain to India. So one of the things that India needs to do is build up good tourism hubs And these hubs, I think we can develop them on more sustainable models, more circular, and not talking about the Western practices, but focusing on the Indian culture and using Indian culture to make these hubs circular and sustainable. And definitely preserving our heritage by those means is one of the sectors that can pick up very fast any foreigner. They love India because of the heritage, because of the diversity, because of the culture. But unfortunately, we have not been preserving it enough. And so, one area where I want to work personally and I want to preserve is definitely the tourism sector.
Absolutely right, because you have picked up a very important sector. Why it's so? Because in economics we call it as like growth generating sectors. One is automobiles, construction, real estate, tourism, and of course agriculture. These are the sectors generate more employment opportunities also. And not only that, these are the sectors having a lot of linkage effects, forward as well as backward linkages. So if we can address the linear economy problems of these sectors, definitely our economic development become a sustainable one. That is for sure. So in that way, I appreciate your effort. You have selected those sectors for. See, one more thing is that in agriculture, if you look, even though we traditionally practice certain things, certain observances through culture, we practice this flooding agricultural cultivation. So we use a lot of water for agricultural production. So when compared to the Western world, so in those areas also we can learn a lot of things like Israel uses micro irrigation technologies and such kind of things. So I'm very sure that this book is going to open a large amount of discussion, as you rightly pointed out, not only from the perspective of an environmentalist or a recyclist, we call it as. It is kind of like you're combining economy, environmentalism, growth, or sustainable development, everything together. It's a practical area. I'm sure that it is going to open a whole lot of discussion in the country about the circular economy.
Sure, sir. I look forward to it, sir. I'll be very pleased to. What I see is the students today are picking up, sir. When I speak to the younger generation, they want to know about the circular business models, and every single business model that we talk about is that brings a new opportunity. I was talking to my parents, sir, and only a few days back, I was just recalling. I'm not sure how it happens everywhere else, but when I was studying, my sister's book, my elder sister's books were passed on to me, and I would pass them to my younger sister. So one book was used by, if not maybe 3 to 4 students year after year. And how that would happen is because we would bind the books with a hard cover. So even if a book was not hardbound, we would get it bound. And there used to be these people who would bound the book at maybe 2 rupees per book or something. And that would enhance the life cycle of the book by 3 to 4 times. Now, today, what happens if I see my son, his books are not hardbound, so they tend to tear up in one cycle. And also, the school pushes new set every year. So we see how we are working on the profit, like you're talking about the trade-off between the greed. So this is exactly a kind of a fit example there, where we see that the schools are pushing those books, but they are not allowing students to use the older books from their own, from their seniors or maybe their own family members. And these are the kind of practices which can make a huge comeback, which has good environmental impact, plus also brings in the circular practices that were always there in the Indian culture.
Shalini, can we go back to the waste disposal for a moment?
So,
We have different systems in different countries, right? Most Western countries has a centralized system. Your job is over as soon as you segregate and leave them in different bins, and that will be carried away. You don't have to think twice about it.
yeah.
When the new government was formed 5 years ago in Kerala, I was invited to a kind of think tank discussion on waste management. So I promptly said that, the most beautiful place in Austria, in Vienna, is their waste disposal plant. It has been designed there by their biggest architect. And the entire needs of electricity, heating, everything is done by this, from this particular establishment. And the only waste that comes out is used to create a garden and a golf course just outside it in the city itself. So this is, in my mind, that was the ideal waste management system. But then others in the group, including some of the ministers who are still there, they were saying that the central disposal of waste is over because this is unhygienic, it creates all kinds of pollutants, and therefore we are going to switch over to waste disposal at the source. In Kerala, there is a very nice waste disposal at the source. You throw your waste into the neighbor's yard. That's the easiest waste disposal that we can do. But other than that, I don't see anything. Because without a central disposal system, there's nobody to collect your plastics, nobody to do this. It is being done, of course, here and there. But is it really true that central waste disposal system is over? That's one question. The second is, in your book, I saw a kind of a diagram where you show that you just don't find, use and dispose. That is the system now mostly in the West. Everything is disposable. In the old days, something went wrong with your car, you got somebody to beat it into shape. But here it is immediately removed and a new thing is put. So you increase the cost and the waste is created. And they put it in your car boot. You don't know what to do with that particular object. And there is no way to dispose of it. So is there a plan to reduce the waste itself? I think you mentioned that. That is the value of it increases, like the notebook story. And it sustains itself for long. But still, finally, there is a disposal requirement. And what is your ideal proposal in that respect? It may not be circular economy, but very much with relation to environmental protection and waste disposal.
Sure, sir. Sir, when we talk about the centralized waste system, this was one of the systems that a lot of countries have been trying to find. Some of them have been able to find a workable solution around it. But a country like India, where it's not just the demographics, but also the temperature, also the culture, which is so different. Having a kind of a central system is comparatively difficult. Even when I was working with these hotels in Uttarakhand, what I realized was the plastic waste that is generated from a hotel, basically which consists of polythene bags, chips, PET bottles, shampoo bottles, those small bottles which are kept in the washrooms, they are actually burnt in the evening. So they don't have any other alternate to do because collection system is so difficult. So what they usually do is they have only two alternates. Either if they are on the highland, they would throw it down the valley, or if they are in the downland, they would simply burn it. So that is the only thing that they are practicing. But at the same time, if you look at Delhi, a kind of a central system again is difficult because carrying waste from one part to another part itself is very difficult. We have a huge area which makes centralized waste systems difficult. So decentralization of waste management is very kind of the alternate and approachable solution to the waste problem. But at the same time, having said that, it needs a lot of proper implementation and execution of the system. Waste segregation is one thing that could happen, but again, as we see, not many people are practicing it. But if have stringent policies, waste segregation along with decentralized waste management systems is the system that I think India can work in India. Coming to your second part, when you're talking about the spare parts and maybe the waste generation itself, sir. So what happens is, I think again with the existing scenario, what we did was completely locked up in a linear system where we thought if one component goes bad, we throw it. And I see how frequently you were quoting about the automobiles, and I also quote about the laptops and mobile phones. All of us are changing our mobile phones maybe in a couple of years. And this is because the practices have come to the industries are practicing where they build in obsolescence in the product, and the product starts to get slow in a couple of years. So you must have read about Apple being sued by one of the American in America for building in obsolescence. So these are some examples which are leading, and what happens is, I think uh, the product selling of products as a product will gradually change into selling them as a service, and that is the best way to change or reduce the waste that is being generated. So one example that I also quote in my book is the example of Savoy Hotel in London, where Philips did not sell the light fittings to the hotel, but what they sold was the service. So Philips by itself was responsible for managing the waste, managing the light fittings, and if something went bad, they would collect it, change it, and replace it. So that way, the waste was not ending up in landfill, but was going back to the producer itself. So another policy that India sees is the extended producer responsibility, but unfortunately, that policy is limited only to the plastics and not to the other sectors. So once we start working on such policies and business models, I think the waste generation by itself will reduce. And this is very important for us to understand, for government to understand, that the sooner we do, the better we'll be equipped to manage the waste problem.
Okay, Shah, you have one last question, and after that we have to wind up.
I think this is I think one comment also. This is the one issue that we face. Actually, the whole lot of thinking about the waste disposal or waste management. I think that is part of linear economy. The circular economy means, I think, that start from there. See, we should holistically start thinking about, that there is no waste. Everything you can use it into a different product. Once you start thinking, the policymakers think, or the people start thinking about that, then definitely everyone will find profit on everything, and everything will disappear from the world. Like, you can use it in a different way in different contexts. One final question I wanted to ask you is, just now, 2 days back, the budget announced by the finance minister in the country. I think I was very happy to see that a new scrapping policy announced by the government, like that many programs they announced. So, do you think that India is also on a changing path towards circular economy?
Yes, sir. I definitely am liking the progress that we are making, in the sense that there is enough awareness. The government is looking at policies that will become more circular in nature. So we have different policies that have come up, or there are several draft policies, I would say. The draft resource efficiency policy has come up. Then there is the iron policy, the steel policy, and the non-ferrous metal policy that has come up. And now we are talking about the voluntary scheme of the vehicle scrap policy. Unfortunately, I would say that most of these policies are there as draft and have not been formalized or not being operationalized. So one thing that we need to do is definitely make these policies operationalized, and start working on them, and not keep them draft policies or strategies for Indian government. But so this is one thing. These are good steps that we are taking. The awareness is there, and I think now that India needs to do is executing these policies in the right fashion. And I believe that we do a good job in it. And India can definitely leapfrog if we are able to implement and execute these policies. We can leapfrog and do much better. One good point that India has is being a developing nation and keeping our resource consumption values within limits. We don't need to absolutely decouple the consumption patterns, but a relative decoupling is good enough for India as of now. So a little bit more awareness, more education should help India to achieve the targets that we are looking at.
Well, thank you, Shalini. Since we started this conversation, no conversation has ended without a reference to COVID-19. But strangely, we did not even use the word so far. But how has it affected your work and your research, and you are unable to travel? Has that had been a traumatic impact on you, or you have lived to learn to live with it?
Sir, I would say the pandemic was a blessing for me, quite contrary to what many people would say, in the terms that when I was writing this book, I didn't have enough time. I never thought that I will be able to finish the book so quickly. So the first few months were actually had gone into writing the book and finishing the book. And fortunately, it came in during this period only that it was published. And the second was the establishing of my company. So again, that was the plan for last 2 years, but I was not able to do. But we incorporated International Council for Circular Economy in July last year, and it was operational from August itself. So these two things happened, which were very good thing for me. I think that's why I call this period as a good period. But when it comes to my work, I think yes, it has definitely impacted the work in the sense that the movement has been limited. Uh, the research work that I would do otherwise, visiting all places and collecting data, has been limited to the online research, and the secondary research has been limited. But I believe the numbers are uh, taking a negative dive, and I hope we are able to do better with the circumstances, and we return back to normalcy pretty soon.
Well, thank you very much indeed. Thank you for explaining the various concepts in your book. I have learned a lot. I'm sure Shaiju also has learned some aspects of it which he had not thought about. So it has been a very, very useful discussion, and I'm sure our viewers will also benefit from it. And I hope you will also benefit, because people will buy your book. And that is, of course, is very important. It's not enough that you have a book, but it should be sold. And my theory is that writing a book is the easiest part. Promoting is the most difficult one. So we hope we have helped you in promoting your book, also in the process of enlightening ourselves. Thank you very much, Shalini. Thank you very much, Shaiju, for
Thank you, sir.
spending your time with us. Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me. Thank you, sir. It was a privilege speaking to you.